My name is Gloria Zimmer, and I've been asked why I'm a United Methodist. Let's begin with my family. I was born at least a third-generation Methodist on both sides of my family. I don't know about my great-grandparents' religious beliefs. This may go back even farther. Both sets of my grandparents were Indiana farmers and active in their small-town Methodist churches. My parents met at the Methodist church in tiny Wauwaka, Indiana, where my mom had just finished high school, and my dad came to start his first year of teaching vocational agriculture and science. My dad went into the Army, and they were married in 1942. I was born about a year later. When Dad was discharged after World War II, we moved to another Indiana small town where Dad taught school, my brother was born, and we attended the EUB church. The other little church in town was Wesleyan Methodist and was known as the Shouting Methodists. I was shocked as a 7-year-old when my brownie troop attended there on Scout Sunday. Prayers were liberally sprinkled with loud amens from the congregation. I just knew my mother would not approve. Since the Methodist and EUB churches merged in 1968 to form the United Methodist Church, even when my family was not Methodist, it turned out we were United Methodists. In 1951, we moved to Rome City, Indiana, where Dad again taught school, and my parents were active in the Methodist Church there. They served on boards and committees. Dad was Sunday school superintendent, and Mom was the youth leader. I went to MYF and a nearby church camp called Epworth Forest, located on Lake Webster. We youth stayed in a cabin near the lake, and the women of the church took turns coming to cook meals for us. That gave me a favorable impression of the Women's Society of Christian Service, a forerunner of United Methodist Women. I went off to college at Purdue, where I visited the Methodist Church in West Lafayette and the Wesley Foundation a few times, but I didn't get pulled in. A college friend invited me to go with her to the Presbyterian Church at the edge of campus. I was quite taken by the exciting preaching there, and it was a shorter walking distance, and I attended regularly. Ralph and I started dating in my sophomore year. Also at least a third-generation Methodist, he had a car and took me to the Methodist church in West Lafayette and also First Methodist Church in downtown Lafayette. My mother credits him for saving me for the Methodist church. After Ralph and I were married, we finished our degrees, a BA in education for me and a master's in civil engineering for Ralph, and moved to the Washington, D.C. area, where Ralph worked for the Bureau of Public Roads, now the Federal Highway Administration, and I taught first and second grades in Prince George's County, Maryland. It was in a small suburban Methodist church where we found friends who became extended family. I sang in the choir and joined the women's group. We repeated the pattern when we went back to Purdue for Ralph to do his PhD, and I was a stay-at-home mom with our son. That worked so well, we repeated it again when we moved to Bozeman 50 years ago. Our daughter was born here. Why I'm still a United Methodist. While I was certainly programmed to be Methodist, at some point a person has to decide whether that's still right for themselves. You can't just mindlessly do what your parents did. You have to make your religion your own. I like the United Methodist Church because it's a denomination that requires a person to think. The church does not dictate what to believe, and I have found John Wesley's quadrilateral useful. Back in the 1990s, when the United Methodist Church was making headlines for the incessant discussions about whether homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teachings, a friend who had more conservative leanings than I asked me, "What are the Methodists doing now?" I told him I was proud to be part of a church where such things were being discussed. Then he asked, "But do Methodists believe in the Bible?" Having just been in a class where we discussed the quadrilateral, I was able to say, yes, we do believe in the Bible as the primary source for discerning truth. But in addition, our founder, John Wesley, advocated applying church tradition, our own life experiences, and reason to come to an understanding. I was pleased we could have a good discussion in which I didn't feel defensive because I didn't know what to say. The church continues to struggle with its relationship to LGBTQ persons, but it's my impression that more and more of us are open to full inclusion. Our United Methodist social principles are developed through thorough discussions and deal with controversial issues. I'm glad our pastors have been referencing them and are conducting classes on the social principles on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evening. They inform our beliefs. We are a denomination that learns and grows toward being more inclusive of all God's children. It models the concept that people of varying races can work together to be the hands and feet of God in the world. This did not come about easily, and the women pushed the denomination. When the denominations, the Methodist Episcopal Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, and the Methodist Protestant Church merged in 1940 to form the Methodist Church, Methodist churches were organized so that all black congregations nationwide were in the central jurisdiction. Meanwhile, white congregations were divided into 5 jurisdictions by geography. The central jurisdiction formed its own Women's Society of Christian Service to match the WSCS in the other jurisdictions. In 1942, the first National Assembly of WSCS, all jurisdictions, and Wesleyan Service Guild, an organization for employed women, was moved from St. Louis, Missouri to Columbus, Ohio, where all members of the racially integrated group could be housed in a hotel. Black women were not relegated to homestays, while white women could stay in a hotel. The women's organization published a charter for racial justice policies in 1952, revised it in 1962, and saw it adopted by the church's General Conference in 1964. When the Methodist Church and the EUB churches were merging to form the United Methodist Church, the central jurisdiction was eliminated, and all churches were part of geographically determined jurisdictions. Another push to the denomination comes in a story from Rusty Harper about his dad, George Harper's national youth work in the days of the central jurisdiction. An inspirational preacher based in Nashville who organized large rallies across the U.S. that included both black and white groups. 3 Southern bishops took him aside and said that official Methodist policy was separate but equal, and that a black pastor would be hired to serve the black students. Well, that person hired just happened to be a seminary friend of George's, and so then they organized black rallies and white rallies that just happened to meet in the same place at the same time with the same speakers, including 2 times Martin Luther King Jr. Sure that his days in that job were numbered, George Harper took a job in 1953 as youth pastor of the Montana Conference of Methodist Churches, and eventually an appointment as pastor at St. Paul's UMC in Helena. He and his wife Dorothy continued to be leaders for many justice issues. The church is evolving regarding its view of women. In 1865, the Women's Foreign Missionary Society was formed because women's needs for medical care and education were not being met in India under the denomination's all-male mission board. The mission board just did not see these needs. There was pushback against what the women were doing. Now, our social principles state, we affirm women and men to be equal in every aspect of their common life. We therefore urge that every effort be made to eliminate sex role stereotypes in activity and portrayal of family life, and in all aspects of voluntary and compensatory participation in church and society. The principles affirm the rights of women and of men. Women pressed for it, and finally in 1956, women were given full clergy rights. We now have women district superintendents and bishops, but I'm told true equality is still a work in progress. Ralph and I value our experiences with United Methodism beyond the local church. We were involved with the former Yellowstone Conference, which was all of Montana, northern Wyoming, and 1 parish in Idaho. Ralph was the lay delegate to the denomination-wide General Conference in 1980 and reserve lay delegate in 1984. He was a lay delegate to jurisdictional conferences where bishops are elected those same years. I attended all those conferences as an observer and editor of the Yellowstone Conference page of the United Methodist Reporter newspaper. was fascinating to see the processes, hear inspired speeches for and against legislation being considered, and often see how God was working. One of our pastors said that we don't have politics in the church. It's called churchmanship. Well, whatever. In this century, I had a 4-year stint as a president of Yellowstone Conference, United Methodist Women. I appreciate that a whole series of pastors in my United Methodist congregations, as well as United Methodist women, continually call me to look beyond myself, to empathize with those who have needs with which we can help. I love that Methodists in the Gallatin Valley are so mission-minded and generously support many projects locally across the U.S. and abroad. United Methodist women support other projects. There is enough work that all efforts are needed. And finally, I love that this congregation is so multi-generational, valuing the contributions of all age levels. That's why I am a United Methodist.